Yesterday, on the 22nd of March, the notorious leaker Dustgolem just dropped another leak on what we could expect to see from the final game in the current Resident Evil trilogy, Resident Evil 9. The leaker was going over how Dragon's Dogma 2 expanded the RE engine's functionality for open world games and claimed that two other games building on this tech are the upcoming Monster Hunter Wilds and Resident Evil 9. He said while these games were expanding on this tech, the project goals for all three have been to retain the series' DNA, so this should hopefully not be seen as a red flag by the community. As well, we are going potentially open world for a Resident Evil game. They are apparently making sure that they're not losing that Resident Evil blood in the process. This is pretty interesting news and quite a exciting bit of news as well, as while Resident Evil does generally have quite a linear design to all of their games, we did have a semi-open world in games like Resident Evil 4 and 8, where while they were never actually open world games, they did allow the player to access a handful of locations with a bit of freedom, and that of course changed over the course of the game based on which areas you could access and which set of locations you were able to go to. It seems that the development is taking a lot longer on Resident Evil 9 than expected as well, which would potentially coincide quite well with this idea of it becoming a fully open world game, and of course Capcom having to expand the RE engine further to make this a reality. There are a lot of unknowns as to how this could be executed by Capcom. It is quite an unusual thing for a Resident Evil game to go in the open world direction, but as I said earlier, some of the games have already ventured towards this open world feel without it fully committing to being an open world game. RE1 and 2 are also big culprits of this idea, where they ventured towards that open world nature with a decent bit of backtracking for various puzzles and revisiting locations at free will, and sometimes intentionally for those puzzles and extra bits in the game that venture out of the main story and instead allow the player to grab an extra item or a different special weapon. But while it did encourage this backtracking and free roam, it wasn't completely open world at the end of the day, and a lot of locations were locked off based on story progression. There are a few other gaming franchises that have opted towards this direction, with games like Halo and Gears of War coming to mind for me personally. Gears of War started to go from a more linear structure to semi-open world on a few levels, and then Halo's case was Halo Infinite going full-blown open world, and it did end up working out for the titles that utilize this, but of course that does come down to whether or not you're a fan of open world games. But at least in my opinion, I think both of these games did it quite well. So as to whether or not this is a bad thing for Resident Evil will come down to how Capcom executes it, and of course your personal preference with whether or not you prefer linear games where it's easier to stay on focus and know where you're going in the game, or if you are a fan of open world games where you like to explore and really be immersed into you having that freedom to really make your own choices throughout the game. Of course, there will always be that main story path where you are fixed on that timeline, but then with open world games you do always have that freedom to just go about your own way of completing the game while having that little narrow pathway to go down when needed. I don't think this is a bad idea for Resident Evil specifically, given how it has dabbled in that open world style briefly in a few entries in the mainline games, but definitely let me know down below guys what you think of this change. And of course this is a leak, so do take it with a grain of salt, but if it is true, what do you guys think of this, and do you think it's a good idea by Capcom to go this direction? And I look forward to reading how you guys continue the discussion down in the comment section. As always, a like would be extremely appreciated if you did find this video interesting, and subscribe for a lot more Resident Evil content. Don't forget to join our Discord, link is at the top of the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.